The Bitcoin network consumes about 0.5% of all electricity, and this is around 91 terawatt hours of electricity annually, which is about the same electrical consumption as the whole of Finland. And the reason for this is down to something known as mining. So at its most basic level then, the concept of mining is essentially just the process of adding one block to the blockchain. And if you're not too familiar with the term blockchain, I do have a video somewhere over here that you can check out. But really, all this really means is that when we're mining something, we're verifying a set of transactions, we're then adding those verified transactions to the blockchain, and then we're rewarding the person who verified those transactions. But don't worry too much about all the details right now, because we're going to break all of this down throughout the whole of this video. And the easiest way for us to break down this concept of mining is for us to look at a very specific example. And so today we're going to look at Bitcoin mining. You see, the way we mine Bitcoin is very similar to the way that we mine precious metals like gold. For example, both Bitcoin and gold have a very limited supply. So with Bitcoin, for example, there's only ever going to be 21 million Bitcoin in circulation. So by around the year 2144, all of the Bitcoin that can possibly be mined will have been mined. In the same way with gold, that's also a very scarce resource. At some point, we're going to get to a stage where no more gold can be mined because we would have mined it all already. Also, we can only get both Bitcoin and gold if we actually go ahead and mine for it. Like, it's not just going to appear in front of us. So if we want to get gold, we're going to have to get our diggers or whatever the hell they use and actually dig it out of the ground. In the same way, if we want to mine for Bitcoin, we have to mine for it computationally. We have to have some sort of process running to actually get those resources out of the computer or out of the ground. Then over time, it becomes increasingly difficult to mine both the Bitcoin and the gold. So initially, for example, when we wanted to mine for gold, it was relatively easy for us to get. We didn't have to dig too far to get that gold. But over time, it's become increasingly difficult. And now I think you have to dig deep below the ocean and you have to dig under layers of rock before you can actually get to those gold deposits. And Bitcoin works in a very similar way. Initially, it was pretty easy for you to solve the relevant mathematical problems to get access to those Bitcoin. But now those computations have become harder as more and more people and more and more users are on the network. So yeah, there are similarities in the way that we mine both gold and Bitcoin. So hopefully that quick comparison between gold and Bitcoin and how we mine both of these resources has helped you understand the concept of mining to some extent. But I think we now have to dig a little bit deeper, and pardon the pun, into how we can actually understand the technical aspects of mining. Well, let's start at the beginning. Basically, when Bitcoin was created by Satoshi Nakamoto, he had a particular problem, and that problem was, how can we have all of these sort of anonymous individuals on this network who don't really trust each other that much come together and agree to the state of the shared ledger, the Bitcoin ledger, which essentially records all the transactions. So how can all of these people on this network agree to all the transactions that are taking place? And the sort of solution that he came to was this concept of proof of work. Now, proof of work is widely used in cryptocurrency mining to validate transactions and to mine new crypto coins. In short, it's really just a decentralized consensus mechanism where a whole bunch of users or a whole bunch of people are expending energy to solve mathematical problems, and by solving those mathematical problems, they're able to verify the transactions happening. This may sound a little confusing, but really all that's happening is that they're being paid to sort of act as auditors. We don't want anything dodgy happening with these transactions. We don't want any fraudulent activity. We don't want people to be spending, their coins twice. This is known as double spending. We want everything to be legit. And the way we do this is by having this process of mining. So whenever we buy something using Bitcoin, there's really a 4-step process involved. Firstly, there's a queue. So basically what I mean here is that whenever we send money, whenever we transact using Bitcoin, we're essentially adding these transactions into a block of transactions. So at some point, all of those transactions can be verified together rather than verifying each of them separately. And then once those blocks of transactions have been verified, they're then added to the blockchain as a whole. So the first step then is queuing these transactions together into a block ready to be verified. This then leads us on to the second step, which is actually the process of mining. So mining is basically the process of verifying those transactions and adding that block to the blockchain. This really involves everyone in the network sort of competing with each other to be the first miner to solve a particularly difficult mathematical problem. Now, a lot of people think that this process of mining involves very difficult computations and solving really difficult equations and things like that. And, this isn't really true. While the maths is hard, essentially all the miners are trying to do is find a particular 64 hexadecimal number known as a hash. And At its most basic level, all this really is guesswork. But with the total number of possible guesses for each of these numbers being in the trillions, there's a lot of hard work going on. And as more and more users join the network, the difficulty of solving each of these hashes, or the level of mining difficulty as it's called, only ever increases. So over time, it becomes more and more difficult to solve these hexadecimal numbers. Third, reward. So once the problem is solved, basically all of these transactions that were queued together at the start are verified and added to the blockchain. And the miner that was able to sort of solve this computational problem, they were able to discover what this hash was, they are then rewarded in cryptocurrency. So if we're doing Bitcoin mining, they are rewarded with Bitcoin. And everyone else that was trying to solve that computational problem and failed are left with nothing but an electricity bill. Finally, repeat. So once all of this has happened, we've queued the transactions, we've done the process of mining, and we've rewarded the specific miner, that process then just happens all over again for the next block or the next group of transactions. So it's really the reward for solving the hash that incentivizes a lot of people to get involved in mining cryptocurrencies, despite the huge energy expenditure involved. But what sort of reward can you expect from mining cryptocurrency? Well, the reward for mining Bitcoin reduces by half roughly every 4 years as the amount of Bitcoin in circulation decreases. So when Bitcoin was first mined in 2009, mining one block would earn you about 50 Bitcoin. In 2012, this was halved to 25 Bitcoin. By 2016, this was halved again to 12.5 Bitcoin. And on May the 11th, 2020, the reward halved again to 6.25 Bitcoin, which is where we're at today. If you're interested, you can keep track of when all of these halvings will occur by checking out the Bitcoin clock, which updates its information in real time. As of June 2022, the price of Bitcoin is about $31,000. So if you were to be involved in mining Bitcoin and you were that one miner that successfully verifies and adds that block to the blockchain, you will get around $200,000 for solving the hash, which is a pretty good incentive. Some people say that while the reward is pretty nice, there are still hundreds of thousands of other miners trying and failing to solve this computational problem. So all they're actually doing is just expending a lot of energy and contributing to climate change and things like that. Now, while it's true that a lot of energy is expended because there's only ever going to be one miner that solves this hash correctly, there is a flip side to the argument which isn't talked about nearly enough. One of the biggest benefits of having a whole load of computers on a network, even if they aren't really succeeding in the mining process, is that it boosts the security of that network. And one example of this is that it avoids something known as a 51% attack. And the idea of a 51% attack is that if a single entity owns 51% of the network, they can convince the other 49% of that network that something has taken place. So in other words, it opens up the floor to security flaws and things like that. So even though a single miner just gets the reward, everyone else is still contributing to the security of the entirety of that network. There's also the global financial perspective, and the idea here is that traditional currencies like the euro, the pound, the dollar, and things like that are using just as much, if not way more energy than cryptocurrencies ever will. For instance, they've got to print money, they've got to reprint money every year, they've got computers running, they've got banks, they've got a whole infrastructure of different technology running at any one time that ensures this whole sort of financial system can keep running. Now, I don't have any exact figures, but I'm pretty sure that the financial infrastructure that we have for traditional currencies is always going to be significantly larger than something like cryptocurrencies, which doesn't require money to be printed. It has a global infrastructure in place already, and it doesn't require any central authority like a bank to ensure things are running smoothly. So while the Bitcoin network consumes more energy than the country of Ireland, I don't think this is all bad news. Ultimately, the reason why the energy consumption is so high though, is because it's down to the consensus mechanism being used. Like, mining is the process that is causing energy to be consumed at such high levels. So if we can just change the consensus mechanism, then maybe we can reduce the energy expenditure too. Fortunately, there are other consensus mechanisms that we can use. So for example, there are things like proof of stake and delegated proof of stake, and both of these consensus mechanisms do expend far less energy than proof of work. But there is a downside in that they also have certain security flaws. Now, I'm not going to get into the details in this video, but the reality is that there are alternatives to the proof of work consensus mechanism that allows us to reduce the energy consumption of these cryptocurrency networks. So there's a lot of scope to create a cryptocurrency network with a significantly reduced energy consumption. So let's say that you're really interested in mining and you want to get involved. How can you do this? Well, the reality is that anyone can get involved in mining, but the important question to really consider is, will it be profitable for you? The easiest way to get involved in mining is to just download something like Honey Miner or Miner Gate and essentially just get the program on your computer, you let it run, and essentially you sort of contribute to the mining process, and whatever contributions you make, you get rewarded for that in small sums of money. But if you really want to take this whole mining process seriously, you're going to want to buy yourself some dedicated mining hardware, like a graphics processing unit or an application specific integrated circuit. And these things can sort of set you back between $500 to tens of thousands of dollars. If you're still not entirely convinced whether or not you want to get involved in cryptocurrency mining, I will at some point be creating a dedicated video on mining. I'll be talking about the types of mining that are available and also how you can get involved, whether you're someone who's advanced with tens of thousands of dollars or someone who's a complete beginner with a couple of $100 to spare. So do stick around for that video. The bottom line is that mining serves a crucial function to validate transactions and to ensure that everything is legitimate and no fraudulent activity is taking place. It's also the way that new cryptocurrency coins are introduced into the system to reward miners for solving the hexadecimal number. Yes, there's a lot of energy involved with the mining process, but that very process ensures that the whole system remains stable, secure, and trustworthy.